The two new cavalry commanders are finally in game, and they both look very strong. So in this video, I'm going to go over the skills, what I think maybe the best pairings are, and talent will be for Joan and Joan of Arc Prime. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and if you were subscribed to the channel already, then you knew Joan of Arc Prime was coming because we covered how that was revealed in a tweet from a Japanese Rise of Kingdoms official account. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, consider doing so that you know about this sort of stuff way before it actually lands in game. I want to start with Joan of Arc Prime because I think she is the commander that most players should go for, and frankly, Joan is a garrison commander that most people can skip. So let's start with Joan of Arc Prime. Her active skill is really, really strong. Sacred Banner is the name of this skill that's going to be important for later. Deals skill damage to up to 3 targets in a forward fan shape. So we got area of effect damage, hitting 3 targets, and 2000 damage factor. That's the magic number. This is big damage, but big damage is not enough these days. There has to be more. What else does she do? Well, the commander's troop and 2 surrounding friendly troops also deal 5% more damage for 3 seconds and gain 20 rage per second. Allow me to review that again. 3 total marches gain this buff. Her march and 2 others. They gain 20 rage per second and 5% all damage. Now, this is weird. This does not stack with other active skills that generate rage. It will not stack with Trajan. It will not stack with Joan of Arc, even if you use her in a separate march. And typically, you cannot put the Prime Commander with their epic form. So keep that in mind. This is a commander that I think is not really here for generating rage, although she's going to do it, and I think this effect is good. It's only hitting 3 total marches, and it's only doing 20 rage per second. I think that's a nice extra effect, but I was originally worried, like, how does this work with Trajan? I think you can actually use both of them, and that's fine. Let's get to the next skill, 100-Year Dawn. Cavalry units led by this commander gain 20% attack and 10% march speed, and if you are outside of Alliance territory, cavalry units' march speed is increased by an extra 10%. So that's 20% march speed in total. And all units deal 5% more normal attack damage. Now, normal attack damage, 5% is really not much. I just want to call attention, however, to the fact that normal attack damage is also your counterattacks. So that means when troops target you, they take 5% more counterattack damage because of that 5% boost to normal attack damage. So in total, it's 20 attack, 20 march speed when you're outside of territory, and 5% normal damage boost. Let's go to the next skill, Return of the Saint. Cavalry units led by this commander deal 5% more damage when attacking troops. When using skills, troops led by this commander gain a buff that increases normal attack damage dealt by 30% for 1 second and can trigger once every 5 seconds. Okay, that's a little weird. When using skills, troops led by this commander gain a buff that increases normal attack damage by 30% for 1 second. Okay, so for 1 second, your normal attack damage is boosted yet again, which is your counterattacks as well as the damage you deal to the target you are directly targeting. Okay, so the next skill, this is the big one, the Blessed. Cavalry units led by this commander have 10% more health. Okay, but the big deal is that when the secondary commander of this army uses an active skill, they have a 100% chance when the skill is maxed to cast Sacred Banner. Let me remind you, that is the active skill. This can only happen once every 10 seconds. So Joan of Arc Prime is insane because she reactivates your active skill. And that happens once every 10 seconds at most. And it happens when your secondary commander uses their active skill. Now, we'll have to see exactly when this timing is, but generally the way that rage and your turns work is that you're generating rage. When you have enough rage, your primary commander uses their active skill. There's a turn of downtime, and then your secondary commander uses their active skill. I don't know, and we'll have to look when she's available, if this means that on that same turn, when your secondary commander uses their active skill, the Blessed will trigger, or if that means it's on the 4th sort of turn, if it's on the very next turn. I don't know how that's going to work. But This is going to be really important for the pairings because that once every 10-second window is very, very significant. The next thing we need to look at is, of course, the expertise skill, Unyielding Martyr. Troops led by this commander deal 5% more counterattack damage. This commander as a whole does a lot of elevation of their normal attacks and also specifically their counterattacks. When the target troop has more than 30% of units remaining, troops led by this commander deal 5% more damage. This is generally good in the open field. Most marches do not get super low, and if they do, they try to run home, or they get sad-faced, and typically, though, they just try to run home, right? So for most open field fighting, you typically are fighting things over 30%. Joan of Arc Prime seems like a beast. She does seem like a top-tier commander. Let's talk about her pairings. When we get to her pairings, I think that right now the meta is 2 cavalry marches. And I think the 2 cavalry marches you probably ought to run are going to be XY primary with a Joan of Arc secondary. And the reason is because of how fast XY skill cycles are. Now, I don't want to nerd out too much on why I think this combo is the best of the best, but just to get a little bit nerdy, the reason I think this works is because of that 10-second timer where you cannot use Sacred Banner all over again. This is like the extra attack, man. It's such a powerful ability on Joan of Arc Prime. The extra attack only once every 10 seconds, and it's when your secondary commander uses an active skill. You want a very short rage cycle. You want to get it as short as possible so that, for example, if you use this XY Joan combo, I think you skill cycle every 6 to 14 seconds. This is really important. What's going to happen is you're going to use your active skill, turn a downtime, you use your active skill on your secondary commander, and boom, this ability is going to trigger, and then there's a 10-second window where you can't get this again. But if your skill cycle is like 6 to 7 seconds, which I think you can get with the XY Joan, then this is powerful because like 12 to 14 seconds later, you get one of these free attacks all over again, assuming your fight lasts that long, and it should. Whereas commanders that have a slower skill cycle, you're looking on an average commander is more like 10, maybe 8 seconds at best. I think that you don't get quite as much out of the Joan of Arc as you do on the XY. That's my prediction at this point in time. I think XY Joan is where it's at, and then you use Nevsky William as like the 2 very best cavalry marches. I also think you could make 3 cavalry marches if you really wanted to, especially if you have Chandra, if you have Honda. If you want to use commanders like Mehmed, you can start to throw them back in, and I think they're very, very strong. I, as you know from my videos, think Mehmed is just sort of a weaker version of Honda Tarakatsu. So cavalry are going to be very, very strong. And if you're just getting to Season of Conquest and you're here for the very first time, this is such an important question to answer. Which cavalry commander do you do? And weirdly enough, if you're only bringing like a very small number of marches, I think Joan of Arc Prime is really good, but I don't know that I would say necessarily that she's better than Nevsky. I don't know. Nevsky is just insane as a commander. He is so high power level. But if you're bringing multiple marches, maybe Joan's better. I'll have to put more thought into this, quite frankly, as to which one of these is the better commander to do if you're in Season of Conquest, because Joan of Arc's power level is very high, but a part of that power level simply comes from boosting other marches. And if you get a look at the raw stats and power level on Nevsky, I think you will actually be surprised how well he stacks up with Joan of Arc. But I will say in general, I kind of prefer AoE commanders. Joan of Arc has march speed, she has area of effect damage, she is generating rage, she doesn't have any powerful debuffs or any debuffs at all, but she does seem really good, and the support tree is very powerful. Just to give you a quick talent tree, by the way, if you're going to use Joan of Arc as the primary commander, we've looked at these sorts of builds before on Saladin, so I can show you my Saladin and show you, he does have the Conquering Tree, which is a little bit different, but here's the build I would recommend. Okay, you only put 2 points in Rejuvenate. I don't think you need more than that. You might theoretically, if you look at the rage you're generating, because Joan generates some rage, you might be able to drop down to 1 point, but I'd have to think about that a little bit more. And if you were to move that point, you drop it down over here into Emergency Protection, which I think is pretty important. If you wanted slightly more tankiness instead of this debuff, which I think is a nice debuff, chance to reduce the attack of the enemy, you could remove 1 point in disarm and relocate that into emergency protection. But this build overall is really good. And I think for a lot of people who don't stay in fights for very long, they enter combat and then they break combat very quickly. I actually think Joan of Arc Prime is an extremely good commander because she makes it so that if you're going to skill cycle once and get out of combat, you're going to get this very powerful extra attack. It's going to reset her ability to get that extra attack all over again when you leave combat. And that 10-second window expires, and then boom, you do it all over again. I think that's going to be extremely powerful. For the record, I do not think Joan of Arc is a great rally. I do think, however, she might be a good counter rally because of all the counterattack and normal attack damage boost that she's getting. You might actually wreck people that are swarming you. I think that I really like the fact that she has area of effect damage. I think that's good. But let's talk about Joan, the other commander that's available here, who is Cavalry Garrison skill, and he is extremely powerful. Make no doubt about it. To be upfront with you, I think he's a garrison commander. I don't think he's a good field commander. So if you're like, I want to invest him in the field, I think you should not. I think that if you're running 3 or more cavalry marches and you're a garrison captain, you could get away with using him in the field. But otherwise, I think his primary role is garrison captain. And I'll just spoil it right now. I think he's going to be really good with Jadwiga as the primary. But let's look at his skills. First skill, 2,200 damage factor. Already you have my attention. That's the sort of damage factor where you might not get some extra ability. But in this case, we do. When this commander's troops has fewer than 50% of units remaining. So this is very clearly designed for garrison, by the way. This skill deals an additional 250 damage factor. So for the majority of the time, when you garrison, you're looking at 2,450 combined damage factor. That is big damage. But from there, we have more. Second skill, cavalry units gain 15% attack. And when troops are garrisoned, and this is why I just don't think he's good for field. For field, all you get is the 15 attack. But when you're garrisoned, your defense is boosted 15%. Your skill damage is also boosted by 10%. From there, unbowed. Troops led by this commander take 10% less normal attack damage. This is so good for anti-swarm. If you're getting swarmed, you want to reduce the skill damage you take in a garrison. You want to reduce the normal attack damage you take. You want to increase your own counterattack damage, by the way. And when troops are garrisoned and take skill damage, they have a 10% chance to remove all normal buffs from the attacker. This is crazy. I don't know what you're going to rally this garrison with, because Pakal Herald are basically countered. This normal buffs portion. Normal buffs strengthen the targeted troops by increasing their attack, defense, or health. Well, Herald is increasing your attack. So I think Pakal Herald, if that buff is removed, increasing your attack, like this could be a powerful counter. Again, I don't want to promise anything until we see the interaction and exactly that's how it works, but I don't know what you're going to rally this commander with. And I think you'll have to only get to a good rally when they release new infantry commanders down the road, whenever that may be. The next skill, cavalry units have 20% more health. Love to see that in a garrison. Cavalry, with their equipment, can already stack insane amounts of health. When launching a normal attack, they have a 10% chance of gaining a buff that increases their normal attack damage dealt by 5%, upwards of actually 20% for 3 seconds. Increasing your normal attack is so good, okay? Normal attack is, again, when you are directly targeting something, you deal normal attack damage to it, and also when things are targeting you, normal attack elevates what's called counterattack, the damage you deal back to those things. So normal attack damage boost is just so good for a garrison. This guy's going to be hard to swarm, I think. And then there's the expertise, which elevates that active skill by a lot of damage factor. The final amount is 2,400 damage factor with an additional 300 damage factor, and now it's radius-based AoE damage. I think it's just a circle AoE. Radius means circle to me, right? So this skill deals additional skill damage to 3 surrounding troops with a 300 damage factor. I mean, this just seems really powerful. 2,700 damage factor and doing AoE damage is going to be really good. This garrison seems extremely strong. Again, I don't think he's going to be amazing in the field. Maybe he will be good, but I don't think he's going to be good as other stronger field commanders that we're used to, like Nevsky, like the new Joan of Arc Prime, even like William, who's extremely strong in the field. And he doesn't really do much buffing or debuffing. Not really. I mean, he's just big, big damage. And this is why I think the Jadwiga pairing is so logical and so strong. We talked about how, in the past, Jadwiga was just sort of waiting for a high skill damage commander to pair with, kind of like how Zeno and Flavius work really, really well together. If we get a look at Jadwiga, who, in my eyes, is one of the best, if not the single best, garrisons for using an Ark of Osiris, the reason she is good is because she is an amplifier, okay? She is doing 1500 damage factor, not noteworthy, but increases all damage by 20%. That includes your normal attacks and counterattacks, by the way, but if you have Yad go before a big skill damage like you have with Jan, that's going to be really insane. 20% more damage to his massive active skill damage is exactly where you want to be. But we're not done. She also gives you defense and health. She also gives you skill damage taken reduction, which is solid. However, she also increases skill damage. So you've got this new garrison commander where you're going to increase the damage a ton of ways. And you're going to generate a ton of rage, by the way. Whenever you take skill damage, you generate rage on Jadwiga. Easy to forget that this is here. And the expertise makes it so you do even more damage to rallied armies. And when the active skill is used, damage taken is reduced. I think this pairing is going to be gangbusters. And I think Jad has to be the primary, which is kind of weird. The Jadwiga primary is a little bit weird because I really dislike mobility talent tree. But for now, it seems to be okay. I really would have expected we'd be making her a secondary at some point in the future when some other dedicated cavalry commander would show up. But no, I think that it's going to be Jad primary and then Jan, and I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, as the secondary, even though he has cavalry skill and garrison trees, which I think I prefer those trees to mobility. Theoretically, you also could pair him with YSS, and I think that could be good. But my suspicion here is moving all in on dedicated garrisons is the play. Equipment is just too weird, okay? You can throw mixed troops into a garrison with YSS, but the reality is that only one troop type is really supported based on the equipment. And so I think moving all in on a full cav plan is going to be better than the Jan YSS plan, is going to be better than the Jad YSS plan. I think the Jan secondary, Jadwiga primary is where it's going to be. With that said, and on the topic of sort of mixed troops, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about leadership commanders, right? What the heck happened to the leadership cycle? Surely the developers have not forgotten that, like, we were actually due for leadership commanders here. So why did they not do leadership commanders? Now, this is actually a very important topic. First of all, people have already invested in leadership equipment. So the fact that leadership commanders have been skipped undermines the investment that players have made in leadership-based equipment. I'm sorry, but it's dramatically undermined if those commanders aren't showing up in game anymore. Now, I don't know if they will, if they're just changing up the order. We don't know. But they were skipped. So even if they show up later, it's still kind of like, bro, where are they at? And maybe there's some bigger play going on to try to keep the meta balanced, and I won't speculate into that. What I will simply say is that the longer we wait for leadership commanders to show up, the worse your investment in leadership gear has been, because the promise of gear is that it's always good, even if the commanders change. That was sort of the whole point of the equipment system, I thought. Now, that said, the reason I'm digging into this and saying, isn't it weird that they skip leadership commanders, is I actually think it's very intentional. I think the reason they have skipped leadership commanders is that perhaps leadership commanders will at some point be going away in favor of ranged commanders. That, to me, makes more sense, but ranged commanders are a way more detailed topic that I'm already extending this video too long to try to cover. What I will say is that if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, you should really do so, because I've covered topics like ranged commanders and potentially some sort of ranged unit showing up in the game in the future in that Japanese tweet that I was telling you about earlier, where the developers revealed a ton of important information. So if you haven't watched that video, there's going to be a card right over here in just a minute. And if you're looking for my overall Rise of Kingdoms tier list with the latest and greatest, with the exception of the 2 new commanders that just landed, I'll have that card up over here so you can see which commander you might consider investing in.